Hey, everybody. I just want to introduce these next two podcasts you'll be hearing from our podcast team. We're going to be taking a short break from our Christian Nationalism podcast mini-series to introduce you to two of our new faculty persons here at Pillar, Dr. Cyndi Parker and Dr. Kyle Keimer. We are really excited about them joining our team, and we think that you'll be really excited about them too after you get to know them and hear a little bit of their stories and learn about them on these podcasts. So we hope you enjoy. We'll pick back up with our Christian Nationalism podcast. We've got 4 remaining episodes in that mini-series. We'll pick up after these next 2 faculty introductions. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Pillar Podcast, a ministry of Pillar Seminary for contextual leadership. Our goal is to equip listeners to become better readers of Scripture and more skillful leaders in their local churches and ministries. If you would like to learn more about Pillar Seminary and sign up to receive exclusive content from Pillar's faculty, please visit pillarseminary.org.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Pillar Podcast. We're so grateful for your presence here with us. Thanks for joining us. With us today, we have quite a treat. We're going to introduce to you one of our new faculty members, Dr. Cyndi Parker. Cyndi, thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's so good to be here.
Great. And with us as well, we have Dr. Donnell Moore and Joe Malarkey and Daniel Cabral. Thanks, guys, for being here as well.
Hello.
So we have the ink is still fresh, signed you to help us teach. You're going to teach Narrative 1 in the fall, Cyndi. And we thought it would be a fun excuse for us to get to know you, for our podcast audience to get to know you, students as well, as part of the podcast. And then for us to just get to see what we have coming down the pike with you teaching, and for everybody to be able to get excited about that. So pretty general introductory podcast here. We have all had a chance to look at your incredible resume and clicked on the LinkedIn and seen all the things about you. So let me just read what I've distilled it down to. You're like a Swiss Army knife in terms of a scholar and servant of the church. And all the little things when they're pulled out are quite overwhelming. So if we could kind of take them one at a time and just unpack, you can help us unpack them as you go. Let me read through the list. You're a scholar, you're a pastor, you're a podcaster, an itinerant speaker, a tour guide. I'm not really sure what other little like toothpick and tweezer tools you have in there, but that's at least a good start. So let's start with the scholar part. You're an Old Testament scholar. Give us a little bit of your background, your areas of interest and expertise before we move to the next thing, please.
My all-time favorite book of the Bible is Deuteronomy. And so I am a scholar of Deuteronomy. And I always tell everyone, Deuteronomy loves the land of the Bible as much as I love the land of the Bible, which is another great reason to love the book of Deuteronomy. My research was in a theology of place. So when Deuteronomy is talking about the land, how does it talk about the land? And how does it talk about how the Israelites are supposed to behave when they're in the land? And there are head nods all over the place to the Garden of Eden. So Deuteronomy is kind of taking these ideas of Garden of Eden and saying, this could be another chance to have that kind of walking with God relationship in this place that God is giving you. You just have to structure society in a particular way. And so that is my PhD research, and I find it to be super applicable everywhere I go. When I'm looking outside, when I'm interacting in my own neighborhood, when I think about how churches should be interacting within their neighborhoods.
Okay, so it's so hard for me not to follow up with nerding out questions. Then
Nerd out, Dan.
We are going to get to talk a little about your book, Jesus and the Land, and then your what you're working on in Deuteronomy. So we might be able to leave some. One of the quick hit surprise questions at the end is something along the lines of, what do you think if there's just a thing to know or a realignment or a thing to do the church needs to really flourish. And so maybe give us a little bit of the when you look out the window or you think through the church and your area of study, where does the rubber meet the road then, a little more specifically?
I think it is the idea of like we are a people shaped by God to be reflecting God's kingdom in the very physical, real world around us. And so we have to be able to see the real world around us and to realize that memories are soaked into the ground. And the more we pay attention to the specificity of the place where we are located, so the histories of what happened here, the more we understand the neighborhoods that are here, the things that are shaping our neighborhoods, which then gets us to now we can understand the people. So we're looking at history, we're looking at place, all of those things kind of being interwoven, and then how people then are affected by the stories. Even if people don't know the stories, there's something about the way that a city or a neighborhood has been shaped that has an influence on people. And so I think the church, if we could start paying attention to, is the grocery store uphill or downhill from your house? Most people don't know unless they're walking to the grocery store and feel it. Most people are in their cars. We control our environment and we become disassociated from place. But we need to become reattached to place. Not only that, because it's important in our daily lives, but I think it's important for how we read scripture, because scripture is definitely anchored in place. And so just kind of fine tuning the ability to understand the importance of place in our lives is really important.
Okay, so we'll get there in a minute. It is hard to resist because there's so much soil to play in here and get our hands dirty. But let's keep going with the Swiss Army knife here. Not only are you a scholar, you have taught places. Tell us where you have taught, where you are teaching. Let's kind of give us where you do the scholarly things.
I've started primarily teaching in Israel at Jerusalem University College. And so from the very early days of teaching professionally, I was teaching and learning how to teach and how to communicate on hills, in valleys, underneath the sun, in the rain. It was very experiential, which I loved and adored, because even as a student, it was the experiential learning that was the most effective learning for me. So I've taught there. I've taught in more casual, less academic, informal environments in New Zealand and in England, in Canada, and all over the US. So sometimes those are for retreats or when churches ask me to come in. Because the reality is I know really weird things. And so people are really interested in the weird stuff, right? They're like, I have never heard that before. I've never heard anyone talk about why hills and valleys help us interpret any particular story. So invitations come because of that. And then I was the Old Testament professor, one of the Old Testament professors at Biblical Theological Seminary in Philadelphia, which is now called Missio Seminary. And then just a whole bunch of adjunct teaching all over the place, lots of online stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, so you piqued my interest now. Like you talk about the weird stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you roll into a place and you're like, I got to wow them. Like what's your go-to? And I mean, if you don't want to show your hand before class starts, that's fine. But like what are you going to wow them with?
So there's a few that it's usually I start with, and I never call it geography because geography makes people roll their eyes around because everyone goes, I hated geography as a kid. People can't read maps anymore, like just whatever. But I talk about learning to hear the voice of the land of the Bible. And that then people are like, well, that's weird because the land doesn't really speak. And I will usually open right away with some sort of why knowing the land completely and radically transforms the theology you get from the Bible. So one of my all-time favorites is Psalm 23, which has everything to do with the visual that is in your head when you think about shepherds and sheep and water, still waters, and having grassy fields. And so if you're thinking anything like Ireland, which is how I grew up, I mean, I have no idea. I didn't grow up with sheep, so I don't know where any of the pictures in my head came from. A drawing somewhere or precious moments, something, right? But it ends up affecting your theology, because if you're thinking the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, and you're looking at green fields of Ireland, the ramifications of how you understand the shepherd and then your role as the sheep are totally different. If you have a New Zealand idea of grass and a paddock or an Irish version, you don't really need the shepherd. The shepherd kind of gets you somewhere where you eat a whole bunch of grass and you become really comfortable and you lay down and there's like a pond of water. So you need everything. So what's the role of the shepherd, right? And then you transform that to what is the role of God in this? And then the sheep become the focus of how we're understanding the psalm. But all I have to do is show people the Judean wilderness and where David was. If we think of David as the author of this psalm, and what would the images have been for David, where there is no such thing as a paddock, there is no such thing as green fields. It looks like someone spray painted a light layer of green over brown in the rainy season. You know, that there is no water. You have to know where to go to get the water, and everything in the Judean wilderness will kill you. The sun can kill you. The rocks will kill you. There's a crevice you can't see. It'll kill you. The scorpions will kill you. So suddenly now the shepherd is the essential role in the psalm. It flips everything, because now if the Lord is your shepherd, you shall not want. Suddenly you understand what provision is, and that it's coming at the hand of the shepherd. And he makes you lay down in green pastures. It's not for all day or all week or for the rest of your life. It's, you have the green you need to eat today, but you absolutely have to get up and follow the shepherd, or the wilderness is going to kill you. And so that Psalm 23 is one of my favorite go-tos. And if I have all the visuals that I can play as well, it just speaks so dynamically to why we have to place the Bible in its place, in its geography, because then we can start to tease out some of the theology. And we've kind of forgotten to do that in a lot of our seminaries, not Pillar, but at other seminaries. Developing the ability to see the land of the Bible, to have an imagination for a different context than your own, is helpful for even reading the words of the Bible, because the authors have such a different context. They have different questions that they want their readers to grapple with and to answer. And we have to be able to see that it's their questions that matter, not the questions necessarily that I want to get out of the text. And I think we have to be able to shift our context and know my context doesn't rule. In this case, when I'm reading the Bible, it's the biblical context that rules.
Okay, so we're kind of bleeding into some of your other roles here, because you're showing us what it would look like for you to engage at a church level, right, as a pastor. Some of the passion you have to bringing this to the real world, but also your podcast that you do is all about context as well. So just break that down. What's your role in the church right now, and how do you serve in the local church? But then also tell us about your podcast.
I am the Director of Education and Conversation at Resurrection Philadelphia. It's a fantastic title.
I love it.
Yeah. It basically was trying to take the things that I'm doing in my world outside the church and bring it into the church. So can we have conversations that are full of curiosity? Can we sit at the table with people we disagree with and be humble enough in that process to realize you probably have something to teach me, even if at the end of the day we don't agree. There's still probably something that I can get from the conversation, and it'll stretch me and stretch my imagination, especially for the Bible and God and theology. So I preach a lot at my church, and sometimes I can't help it, but we do bulletins, and I sneak like a copy of a map inside the bulletin everyone knows if there's a map in the bulletin, Cyndi is teaching that day. So I'm like, I can't help it. You have to know where this was.
Awesome.
So the podcast is called Context Matters because context matters. It's all the matters related to context and the importance related to context. And it is so much fun to do this podcast. It's my way of taking really geeky, kind of heady knowledge, sometimes specialized books, and breaking it down and making it conversational and making it approachable and introducing it to the world. And so that's been fun. Plus, I get to interview all these people that are not like directly related to my professional world. And they would never, if I called someone up and said, hey, can I talk to you for an hour about your new book? They would never, everyone's too busy for that. They would never do that.
Yeah.
But I can say, hey, can I talk to you for an hour about your new book on the podcast that I host? And they say yes.
Oh,
it's
man.
Delightful.
Gosh, that's incredible. It is, I think it is probably clear a long time before just now for our podcast listeners that this is a real coup that you're here with us. It is such a gift, such a privilege for us to get to learn from you and have our students engage with you. Hey, I want to take a quick break from the podcast you're listening to tell you about a wonderful workshop that we have coming up real soon. It's a workshop for women backed by popular demand. We're doing another workshop with Dr. Beth Currier on the Song of Solomon. Truly Co. is hosting, and Dr. Currier will be the expert in the room to take folks through the Song of Songs again. Like I said, this is backed by popular demand. We had such a wonderful response that we've asked Dr. Currier to do it again. This workshop is coming up June 13th at 7 Central. And if you want more information and you want to sign up, you can find about it online at pillarseminary.org/events. Hope to see you there. Donnell, unmute. You're talking about something.
Yeah, Dan. As she was describing place, context, my mind went directly to leadership from a standpoint of if, as we get our students to look at the world of the Bible as the primary resource, intention, how parishioners see the world of the Bible, it really can aid in modifying how we do work of ministry in the 21st century. But you gotta know that ancient Near Eastern culture. You gotta know the topography and the geography, because that makes up the land in which God has given us to lead us through. And it's not what we see. It's not cars and high rises and skyscrapers and the like. It's not that at all. Even if we're talking the urban, the rural centers, it's not the green fields and the cornfields and all of the horses. It's not that. But if we keep that as our imagery, I'm getting excited. If we keep that as our imagery, we continue to have a flawed understanding of how to do ministry in the 21st century, understanding that it's the way God intended it to be then, and we take that and apply it now. That's just exciting for me. It really is.
Dr. Moore, I love that you said that and explained it in that way. It makes me think, so often when we're reading the words of the Bible, we like to contextualize it with other like ancient Near Eastern manuscripts. And so you can go, the flood narrative in Genesis, how is it like other flood narratives? And only with those playing in contrast to each other do we really start to see what the biblical writers are doing? And in the way you just phrased the leadership, it sounded to me anyway that what you're saying is, let's put the places next to each other. And then we understand what the biblical authors are saying in this context, which makes it translatable in a different place with different people in a more modern time.
And that's what we are attempting to do. Once they get immersed in Bible, then they come over on the leadership side, and we began to sort of mirror the two so that they can understand it doesn't change what God is asking us to do. But you have to appreciate that before you can appreciate this. And that's what we're working toward. And it's been difficult, not because of students, but because when students get it, they come back and say, and Joachim is a good example of that, sometimes they push way back because they really don't have the place or the contextual understanding of the worldview of the Bible at their fingertips. And so one of the things I'm trying to do right now, I don't want to take up all this time, is I'm going back and in my own little infantile way, teaching ancient Near Eastern culture as I know it and as I'm being taught, so that before I teach a lesson, so that the students in the Bible classes understand this is not what you think. This is what it is. And I think that gives a more richer understanding and appreciation.
Yeah. Thanks, Donnell. And then also thanks for picking that up when I totally spaced out there. So appreciate picking up the fumble on the field.
It's a team effort.
Cyndi, you're a itinerant speaker. I think we can kind of fill in the gaps. You speak on this kind of stuff just anywhere that you're able to. Let's get to the tour guide. You also do tours, and well, maybe not as many now, but give us your tour guide background too, if you would.
So I continue to work an adjunct with Jerusalem University College. So they would not say those are tours because those are academic classes. People are taking exams. But I found a lot when I was working with JUC and had adults so not just graduate students, not that they're not adults, but when it's all other career people who are not professionally studying the Bible. And they would be in my groups. They would just have so many different questions about modern politics and food and farming. And they also wanted to really explore the biblical landscape and geography. And so I started putting together my own tours. So different than what JUC is doing, and what they're doing is fantastic and amazing. But this was my way of trying to get a little bit of modern history of who are the modern people who live in the land of Israel and Palestine. There's more than just Jews and Muslims. So introducing people to Bedouin and to Druze and to Christians that are in the Palestinian territory, as well as Christians in Israel, and just kind of complicating their understanding of what the land is, as well as hitting every geographical region from the biblical text and hiking all over the place and reading the Bible and just trying to ingest what is this place. And it's my way of trying to learn to listen and to taste the land, because I always take everyone to like my favorite chef of the moment. I'll always go to their restaurant or their winery or something just to be like, this is the ground. This is the soil that we're tasting.
Oh man. Okay. So we might not have as much time as I thought because everything else was already so interesting. But for our listeners, if you want to get a really good introductory kind of taste of this, the importance of place in the story of Scripture, your book, Cyndi, Encountering Jesus in the Real World of the Gospels, is fantastic. I have read it and I learned a ton, really enjoyed it. And it really does kind of bring down to the ground these things that you're talking about, these concepts we're discussing here in a really demonstrable way for the scriptures, for the Gospels in particular, Jesus of the Gospels. What I don't know, though, how much we need to talk about that other than to say everybody should read this book. And Joe, you've read it. Give us a kind of quick hit list of the things that you found most useful. A student of ours just read the book. What's your take on it?
I finished it a couple weeks ago, and the whole part about harvest cycles and climate, the agrarian cycle, so I live in central Nebraska, which it's an agrarian culture, right? Like we farm, we ranch, like all that stuff. And so it makes sense here, but I never let it translate to the world of the Bible. And so now, I was reading through Judges this morning, preparing for our equipping hour class, and I'm reading through the Gideon story. And the Midianites are raiding everything, right? And he's beating wheat in a wine press. And I'm like, I know why now. I know why. Because it wasn't time for grape harvest. So he's probably hiding that, it's just like stuff like that. That's like, it just pops off the page now because I'm looking for it. Whereas before I had no idea to look for it. So yeah, it's super helpful, man. It just opened your eyes up in a fantastic way.
I love that. Yeah. See, now you are the holder of weird information too.
Make everybody weird. What's the keep Austin weird? Keep Pillar weird. That's we can steal that one. That's really cool. Now you've contributed a ton to another wonderful resource. I think it'd be good just to let you talk about. It's really, really cool. And I've learned a ton from it, used it a lot, and my own teaching is the Lexham Geographical Commentaries. Yep. Could you just talk a little bit about that as a resource to let folks know what it is and how it might be used and so on and so forth?
It is available digitally. If you use Logos Bible software, you can just do the plugin and then it hyperlinks a whole bunch of things to all the different articles. So that's fabulous. And then the print version is also great. It is all these different authors who have contributed to this project are people who have lived for a significant amount of time in the land of the Bible. So people who have engaged with the Bible and the weather patterns in real and substantial ways. And so they're bringing that kind of insight into the text. So the articles that are chosen are articles that have geographical significance. And so anyone who's planning a sermon, doing their own studies, who maybe just aren't accustomed to seeing, like they just don't know, they haven't done a geography class. It's just is not information at their fingertips. This is a beautiful resource to say, pay attention to this particular road, pay attention to where this mountain is. Recognize that Jesus is saying this when he's in Galilee, where it's greener, than when he's in Judea, which is browner, and just kind of pointing out the things that are in the text, but sometimes we just don't have eyes to see it. So it's a fabulous resource, and I love the contributors in this resource. They're my land people.
Oh man, that's great. And they're all almost to an essay, super readable. So it's not a slog for a couple hours. It gives you the good stuff that you need with some good charts and pictures and just a wonderful, like you say, collection of scholars on this. There are 2 volumes in the New Testament, and I believe you're also working on, I think the Pentateuch is out now, and then some others are forthcoming, right?
Right. Well, 2 that are in print. The Pentateuch is in print, but currently hard to get. So I don't know if they did a small initial release, but there's kind of a back order there. And all the rest, they've been written. They're just in the editing process right now. So they will trickle out over the next couple of years, I think.
Fantastic. Guys, have y'all seen this resource? Have any of you seen these tools? Or
I have not.
Joe, did you nod your head?
Yeah, I have the 3 volumes that are out because you told me to get them, so I did.
Preach it
And
to the choir then.
well, Cyndi, when you get a moment, send me the link for the logos.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can rustle that up too. Cindy's probably got somewhere to be right after this, so we'll. She's always moving somewhere. That's great. But yeah, we'll get those links to you. Tell us as well. You're publishing your dissertation, or is it kind of an expansion of that? I guess with this Deuteronomy.
It's taking the dissertation, which I completed back in 2015, so it's bringing it up to date, and yeah, taking out some of those super weird, hard to read dissertation-y things and making it slightly more readable. I think there's still probably a different volume I could do for just normal people. but it's going to be how do we think of this theology of place and what Deuteronomy is doing with the structure of place, which is, I think, just so incredibly beautiful and really challenging. If we take Deuteronomy seriously, it is really challenging to recognize what God wants his people to do in their humility and their generosity, not only with the land and with animals and with other people, other Israelites, but with strangers who are among them, traders who are passing through. It has massive implications.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, we can't talk about that because it's liberal. I'm just kidding. That's my cynicism has crept in. Sorry. Well, that's wonderful. I can't wait to read it, and I get what you're saying. I feel like this with Jesus, the Torah in the flesh. If we would just do what the scriptures suggest, the God of Deuteronomy in the flesh, it would just be an entirely different level of courage and generosity and capacity to care. Oh man, I can't wait for that. Who are you publishing that with?
Lexham is publishing it for me.
Okay. Oh, that's fun. Yeah. Okay. Last real question, then we're going to get to the lightning round of less important questions. Last question here. Why are you excited to teach at Pillar?
Well, okay, there's probably a few, but can I tell you how excited I was to look at your syllabus and realize that maps were one of the first things listed that people had to engage with? I was like, oh, finally, a place where, because I make all of my students in every context, even like when I am doing retreats with people and with the youth group retreat we just had with our church, I make everyone do maps and examine maps. And so I think just the fact that Pillar is already on board with maps and place, it just pulls at my heartstrings because I love that so much.
Oh man.
I just really love that Pillar focuses so much on empowering. I mean, it's equipping, but it's empowering students to read the Bible well. Like in the way that you stack the classes. And so therefore there's a lot of Bible familiarity by the time that you're done, just paying attention to genre, just all of these different things where it's this workspace to come and wrestle with and talk about what the implications of what they're reading is all about. And so I really like that.
Nice. That's really cool. Any other questions, gentlemen, that are of a serious nature before we get to the less theologically thick questions?
Yeah, I'll ask my question real quick because my baby's being put to sleep. But it's just exciting hearing you talk about how passionate you are about sharing these kind of things with like the normal person who might not ever think to look at maps or think of place. And I just was wondering if there's anything, you mentioned like stretching minds earlier and introducing people to new realms. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that you're currently researching, learning that we could hear from you down the road that's like stretching your mind right now. Is there anything that you're looking into that's new to you that could maybe be related to us normal people down the road?
So I'll tell you the very first thing that comes to mind is I've been re-examining the book of Exodus. And this is just because since September, I have been joined with other people in my church for a very slow read through the book. And in doing so, I mean, I've read Exodus a lot. Exodus shows up all over the place in the rest of the Bible. So it's an important book to kind of get your hands on and to grasp what is going on. But I think going through it so slowly and just talking about it week after week after week, I just started seeing Exodus everywhere else I was looking. And once again, really hit with the God of Israel, who is hard to see at the beginning of the book, moves into the camp at the end of the book. And this
Makes
God of Israel, is so intent on creating a relationship with his people. And this God of Israel is doing it not just for the sake of Israel, but for the sake of the world. And so Exodus, it just hammering home again. And I've really just been sitting patiently with the idea of what is the mission that God is on? And so what did God's people, the Israelites, do? What is the church supposed to do in response to what God cares about? So that's where I've been sitting in a whole mashup of ideas.
Okay, so forget the quick hits because it would just be irreverent to go to that. But let's follow up on that. Dr. David Larson, in his own work in placemaking, talks about placemaking as the mission of God. I think the whole thing can be framed by God making a place and then us on mission with him, creating a place as we go for God to dwell. Is that some of what you're talking about? Would you want to kind of tweak that, or is that what you mean with the mission of God and then his dwelling with us? What?
Yeah, I think once you frame it, that there's probably different ways to wordsmith the same idea. I think in Exodus, the placemaking that we're seeing it is also enshrouded in this whole, how can a holy God be in the midst of his people?
Yeah.
And so you have this holiness idea.
Yeah.
Deuteronomy, I'll just go back to Deuteronomy, the best book of the Bible. Deuteronomy is kind of broadening that and is creating the idea that the entire land can be the tabernacle. But if the whole land is going to be the tabernacle with the chosen place, almost the temple at the center, but Deuteronomy spends a lot of time talking about how the holiness, the sacredness of the center absolutely has to push out into common space. But how beautiful that vision is. And then we get glimpses of that in small ways in the book of Isaiah and Jeremiah, and Ezekiel definitely pushes hard on the same theme. And I think this becomes part of the biblical theme that Jesus then ends up picking up as well, right? It's no longer a building placemaking that is creating or pointing at sacredness and holiness. It's now the Holy Spirit and just the pushing it outward. But it requires transformation of the people, right? So it's not just something that rolls over the top of you and keeps going. It requires an ingesting and a transformation of the people to sanctify the places that are around you. Yeah, Chris Wright has been foundational for a lot of my own work. And
nice.
His new commentary on the book of Exodus was used deeply over the course of this past year. I find him so just amazing in the way that he is looking so much to the heart of God and what God is doing, and how purposeful he is to hear the global church reflect on that. It's not a European Western centric way of thinking. And I just so deeply appreciate his work.
So let's end with, because now you're talking about resources and I want to learn from some folks too. So give me we'll do quick hits and stranded on a desert island with only 2 Deuteronomy resources outside the Bible. What are you going to take?
The Tigay is the Jewish Publication Society commentary on the Book of Deuteronomy is spectacular.
Okay.
There's so many good ones. I don't know. That's painful.
Well, that's helpful though.
Okay,
So
we'll go with Tigay.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. That's very expensive. I was just about to put it on my wish list after you said that. I'm going to try and find it used somewhere. That'll be a real coup. Oh man. Well, thank you, Dr. Cyndi Parker, for your time. We are so excited to have you teaching our students. The first class for our students in the fall will be you, and we just love that.
We will learn together.
Of course, that's always the way it is. But we're really pumped that you have agreed to work with us and alongside us and let us learn from you as well. Thank you also for joining us here today. Thanks for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. And just one more time, Encountering Jesus in the World, the Real World of the Gospels is the book. And what's the name of your podcast that everyone should subscribe to?
Context Matters.
Context Matters. I was going to say that and then I got nervous.
So is that it?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for listening, podcast audience. We're grateful for your participation with us as we learn, as we engage with this wonderful scholar here today. And we'll see you next time.
Share this episode with your friends so they come learn with Dr. Parker.
That's right. That's right. That's another call to action. There's still time to enroll.
Let's do it.
Yes, great. Thanks. Want to let you know that if you are interested in studying with us at Pillar for the fall 2024 semester, we're still accepting applications all the way up to July 29th of 2024. So you can find out more information about the application process and see the application itself at pillarseminary.org/apply. If you have any questions, email us at admissions@pillarseminary.org and we'll get all your questions answered and help you fill out that application and get it submitted.
Thanks for listening to the Pillar Podcast, a ministry of Pillar Seminary for contextual leadership. Please visit us on the web at pillarseminary.org to find out more about our academic degree programs and non-credit learning opportunities. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and podcasting platforms. Thanks again for listening.